Well, hey there, friendships. Welcome back to Curtis's Corner. If you're new here, hi, I'm Curtis. This is my corner. And on today's Film Friday, we're going to be discussing my rankings for the 2000s horror movies. Now, I have done the 60s and 70s. I have done the 80s. I have done all of the 90s. You can check all of those out on my page. I will actually create a separate playlist, so I will link that right up there for you so you can check out my ranking videos. But this is going to be a 5-part section of this decade. And that is because there are so many films that I need to tackle. Part 1 and Part 2 are going to be a top 40, and I'm going to cover 20 films in each. Part 1 and 2 are only going to cover from the year 2000 to the year 2004, and then 3 and 4 will be a top 51. And I'll deal with those at a different time, and that will cover 2005 to 2009. And then I will end this series on a top 10 throughout the whole entire decade of my personal favorites that I will constantly go back and rewatch just because they're so much fun and I get a lot of enjoyment out of them. So, if you are interested to see part 1 of my top 40 countdown of the first half of the 2000s of just horror films, and it's a title and a half, then keep on watching. So coming in at number 40, we have The Haunted Mansion. Now, this is a Disney remake. This stars Eddie Murphy. As a kid, I feel like I enjoyed it, but remembering everything that I can remember from it, not that great. Honestly, it had the potential to do some good scares for a children's movie, but it just didn't quite meet the expectations that it could have met. And that is why I have it placed so low, because it had so much potential that it just kind of flopped on that potential. If that makes sense? Especially upon rewatch, like, you can't really, the graphics aren't great. All the effects, they're not great. Number 39 is Shaun of the Dead. Now, this is an enjoyable film, but, and I know it's supposed to be a horror comedy, I just found there was more comedy in it than there was of horror. There wasn't too many jump scares. The effects were pretty good. The acting was okay. I know British humor is very hit or miss with people, and I think on this one, it was a miss. A lot of people love this film. Like I said, it's an enjoyable film. It's just not one of my favorites, and that is kind of why I place it extremely low, just because I don't really get the humor in this one. I've seen other British films and TV and have gotten the humor in that, and I enjoy it. This one, not my favorite at all. Number 38 is Wrong Turn. This one, again, had a creepy premise, could not really deliver, to the point where the sequels have just kind of spun off into nonsense territory, and even the reboot that they tried to do didn't quite meet any expectations and made this one seem better by default. When you finally start seeing the villains of this film, they're almost laughable. They don't come across as being very serious and very life-threatening, even though they are. I just think it could have been done better, and it was just basically like a very cheap version of, like, The Hills Have Eyes, which I think did, like, this kind of a trope a bit better. Number 37 is Carrie. This is the made-for-TV version remake of the original. Storyline, pretty much shot for shot, exact same. It's almost like as if you were to compare the Psycho remake with Vince Vaughn to the original. It's like shot for shot with, like, better graphics, but it wasn't. It's not scary. It doesn't have the suspense as the original one does, and I just think they really missed the mark on this remake, and I think they could have done a whole lot better. I get that their budget is lower because it was a TV movie, but so was It from 1990. That was a mini-series, and they did better. Also, I just want to make a quick mention, speaking of It. I don't know if I mentioned it in a past video, but It is, like, one of my absolute favorite movies as well, but I'm not including it as a film because it is a mini-series and not an actual film, which is why it wasn't on my original list. Scream 3 comes in at number 36. Now, I love the Scream franchise. I really do. This one was one of the letdowns. It was definitely the weaker film in the franchise. I found the franchise, it started with Scream, and then Scream 2, and then it went Scream 3, and then 4 and 5, we're bringing it back up again. This one, I find the character development, the killer reveal, it was just very like this, and then the character reveal was like, hiccupy, like lots of speed bumps in the road. I liked the concept that they were going for. The set pieces and the set design were fantastic, but the motives, the kills were kind of just meh. And I found the series at this point seemed to feel like it wasn't getting its footing, especially being compared to its prequel that had happened, the Scream 2. It definitely fell behind in its shadow, and it shows. But then when Scream 4 comes along, they pick it right back up again. But I feel like it's just sandwiched right between two really good films in the franchise, and that's where it kind of falters. And number 35 is Queen of the Damned. This is a sequel, loose sequel to Interview with the Vampire with Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise. Now, Tom Cruise, who played Lestat in the first one, does not reprise his role in this one, which I'm very disappointed about. I guess he was just done with the franchise. I'm not really entirely sure. The aesthetic was very gothic. It was a very different tone than what Interview with the Vampire was. And I find the storyline was kind of all over the place, and that's because they were combining two stories into one movie. Yes, they called it Queen of the Damned, but that's actually the third book in the trilogy of that franchise. It's supposed to go Interview with the Vampire, Lestat, and then Queen of the Damned. But they only called it Queen of the Damned and actually combined the Vampire, Lestat, and Queen of the Damned books into one story. And I really wish that studios would stop doing this. Focus on one thing at a time and flesh out the characters instead of rushing along and trying to get good sequels left, right, and center. Focus on what you want to do, make sure it's a good story, and then do it. This is also where I find, well, like the Resident Evil movies, where they are just kind of very much, here's all this heavy metal type of rocker music. That's kind of what this is. It's just very much a soundtrack of just rock music all the time, very gothic. And like, if anything, more gothic than the Underworld series. It's just, it wasn't... Aaliyah was great as the villain of this film, but her performance was overshadowed by all of the other poor performances and just how lackluster the storyline and the filming and just all of it was just very much a letdown. Coming in at 34 is From Hell, that stars Johnny Depp, and he is a sort of detective who's trying to figure out these murders that are being caused by Jack the Ripper. Now, Jack the Ripper was never actually found out who he was in real life, and obviously, presumably, clearly dead by now. But in this, they do reveal who Jack the Ripper is, and it is kind of a twist because you're trying to figure out who it is the whole time, but it's a very slow burn movie. It's very much like Silence of the Lambs, where it's that kind of a slow burn where not a whole lot happens. And if you're not into a whole lot of gratuitous nudity, that's what you're pretty much also going to get in this film. And the violence coming from Jack the Ripper, the aftermath you kind of see, but as things are happening, it's all very much cut away. You don't see much, and it's all done kind of off screen, which is extremely disappointing. Even though it's like a rated R film, they could have elevated it a whole lot more and just kind of chose not to, in my opinion. Johnny Depp, I found his character was kind of very sidelined, even though he was the main focus and the story followed around him. His character seemed just very kind of like meh, and I feel like his character could have been done more justice. That's not a proper sentence, but you know what I'm talking about. Coming in at number 33 is Ghost Ship. Now, I remember watching this about 3 times. I don't really remember anything past the opening sequence where everyone dies on the ship. That is pretty much the only thing that I remember, but for that alone, that is why I've placed it above all of these. The set piece of that, the trauma that you kind of are just like, what just happened? The acting of a very young Emily Browning, and just the chaos that ensues and just kind of wondering how. All of that makes for a better film than everything else on this list so far. And I think it's just so wonderful to see. It was a mixture of practical along with CGI effects. You can really see the CGI when it is CGI, but it is still a very shocking moment when you do see everything kind of happen. It's just, I kind of want them to do a remake of it. Keep that scene, make it a little more gorier, and just redo this film and change the rest, because no one really remembers this film. And that is kind of why I've placed it where it is, because while it's a very memorable scene, the rest of the film is overshadowed by it. And number 32 is Darkness Falls. This is a story about a tooth fairy who comes and takes teeth. Now, I've only seen this once. I remember seeing it as a kid. I enjoyed it. I remember laughing when I saw the tooth fairy. The story is a very good premise. It gives me now, like, the vibes that Lights Out gives, but just not as executed properly as Lights Out was. I think if they did do a reboot of this film, it would be done well. Like, I think the reboot would be justice if they end up doing a reboot. I kind of hope they do. But it is an enjoyable film. It's one where you can go in. It's dark enough to be scary, but not too dark where you're going to be terrified forever. I just think the effects and the story could be elevated just a slight bit more and give some characters a bit more background. Add an extra 20 minutes to this film and then flesh out some of the characters a little bit more. Otherwise, it's a pretty decent film. Coming in at number 31 is Exorcist: The Beginning. This film, it, again, had promise. The Exorcist is such a good film and holds such a close spot in my heart. But this film just kind of like went all over it. It didn't do what it should have done, to the point where they made two of the same film using the same actor as the same character by different directors to tell the same story in a different way. Because Dominion, which was a prequel to The Exorcist, and then Exorcist: The Beginning, literally same story, same actor, same events kind of play out, just told in a different way. This is the only one I remember watching, though, out of the two. And I feel like, from what I can remember reading, this was the one that was more well-received, and even that sucked. But it's still technically canon to this franchise. So, I might be a little biased because it is connected to the Exorcist franchise itself, and that's why I kind of placed it as high. So I do need to kind of go back and rewatch it. But from what I do remember, that's also why it's in my later half of the 20s, because it is just, it's not great. It's not, no. At number 30, we have Jurassic Park 3. I know, some of you are still arguing about my last ones where I talked about Jurassic Park being horror. It is a technical horror because they are giant, scary monsters chasing you, okay? It's horror. You can't tell me it's not, because you would not see a dinosaur in real life and be like, oh, that's fun, if it was chasing after you. It's scary. This one, I like the new dinosaur. I like the Spinosaurus a whole lot. I think it's a great villain. The talking raptor kind of kills it. The effects that they do use, you can tell that they are very CGI. I mean, some of the older ones now you can tell that they are CGI, but this one, for the time as well, shouldn't be able to really tell that it's CGI, considering how well done the CGI was in the past two films in this franchise. You shouldn't be able to tell. This one, you can tell. It looks a little more cartoony than it should, and the acting is very subpar in this sequel as well. Storyline, very rushed. Characters are not fleshed out at all, and it's just kind of, they're just relying on the nostalgia of the past two films to kind of keep this one going, and that's where this one falters a lot. In 29, we have Signs. Now, this film was pretty decent. I enjoyed the acting. I thought the storyline was pretty good. Until the end. The ending is what killed it for me because of the twist. And it's like, how? Because it's a movie of aliens. There are more advanced species. They're coming to Earth to take over or do whatever their plan is. And then we find out their weakness. And it's like, really? And that is why it's placed where it is. Specifically for that twist. Do not like. Do not like. Do not like. At number 28, we have The Mummy Returns. Same kind of concept. Fun, enjoyable film. Storyline, good. Acting, good. Effects, good until the end, when we see the Scorpion King, aka The Rock. What is that PlayStation 1, no, N64 graphic that they're using? If you can have technology in the 90s for CGI, create dinosaurs with perfect color and lighting, why can you not create a giant half-man, half-scorpion with perfect lighting? He was 100% not in that scene. Very disappointing. And that is why it's in its place. Coming in number 27, we have Van Helsing. I thoroughly enjoy this film. I actually just rewatched it a couple months ago. The only thing I'm gonna say is the CGI is where it lacks. It does not hold up to today. It looks immensely better than what Mummy Returns CGI monster was, but it is still not great. You can tell that it's very CGI. You can tell that it's not a real creature, or at least making you think that it's a real creature. It's not at all, and you can tell that they're fighting like a green screen object. The acting, it's Kate Beckinsale and Hugh Jackman. They're great. And again, the whole kind of retelling of the Van Helsing storyline is really good, and it's very, while it's still set very much in the past, it's a nice modern updated take on this story, and I thoroughly enjoyed that aspect of it, which is why it's not super low on my list, but it's not in the top 20. Coming in at number 26, we have Alien vs. Predator. This was the first time that Alien and Predator meet up. Now, full disclosure, I had never seen a single Predator film before seeing this film. I've recently seen Prey and Predator 2. But prior to watching Alien vs. Predator, I had never seen a single Predator film. I had only seen the Alien franchise. I was excited. Even though I had never seen them, I was 100% Team Predator, just because he looked friggin' cool. Why I didn't watch the films, I don't know. The amount of gore that was cut out of this film, because it was a PG-13 film, was extremely disappointing. That is why I placed it here. Because the storyline was meh, and every past iteration of an Alien or a Predator had either been 18 or rated R. So why are you making a PG-13 film? Makes no sense. So, with your PG-13 rating, zero gore, lackluster storyline, and kind of subpar acting, you got placed where you placed. You could have had higher, but you chose not to. And number 25, we have Ginger Snaps Unleashed. This is the sequel to Ginger Snaps. This one was good, not as enjoyable as the first. It was kind of a repeat of what happens in the first, but it happens to Ginger's sister. Instead, everything kind of like follows her, and it's just repetition. And I think that's what the whole franchise is. I've never actually seen the beginning, the third movie, but all I know is that it's apparently the first movie, but set in like the 1600s. So this one is just, it follows the events that have happened from the first, but it's just not done as well. The graphics are relatively the same. It's just, they could have done better. They could have altered the storyline a little bit instead of doing what was already done. Like, we don't need that cookie cutter aspect of these films. You can get creative, especially when it's an original film. Follow the formula and then change it. That is what you need to do in order to make a good sequel. At number 24, we have Urban Legends Final Cut. Same kind of thing. You follow the formulaic recipe that you've come up with for the first one, and then you have to change it. They didn't really change much. And it was kind of a letdown seeing who the killer was in the second one. I don't want to give it away because it's like that murder mystery type film where a killer goes around and they're killing people based off of urban legends. Great concept. The first one was really good. This one, not so much. Enjoyable, yes. Great story, great acting, no and no. So, you're almost there. You were almost there, but you didn't quite make it. Number 23 is 13 Ghosts. This is a remake of the original. I think Matthew Lillard was a standout performance in this. I loved the design of all of the ghosts. The storyline was very unenthusiastic. None of the characters were really fleshed out at all. The acting, aside from Matthew Lillard, was very just meh. Again, it's a cult classic. It's very enjoyable. You watch it, you're gonna enjoy yourself watching it, but they could have done a whole lot more and had it be a whole lot better than what it was. They just kind of dropped the ball a little bit and they just missed the mark. Like, they just missed. Like, there's the line. They were like right here. I think if you fleshed out these characters and told a more elaborate story, not too elaborate because then you're gonna lose the people, you could have had something golden on your hands. But we didn't make it quite there. At number 22, we have Jeepers Creepers. Concept of this. fantastic. I love the idea of this giant monster waking from his sleep every, 27 years to go and kill a bunch of people, and then he goes to sleep. Sounds fun. Not that scary, though. I did not find Jeepers Creepers to be that scary. I think the performances were decent, and the action sequences within it, the set pieces within it, very telling of the time. They're good, but it could have been done better, and like I said, the scares could have been elevated to make it a better horror film. I'm honestly looking forward to seeing the reboot of this whole franchise, whether it be a full reboot or if it's going to somehow connect to the 3 already established one, just with a different director and having nothing to do with the old director. I think they're going to be going somewhere in a positive space, and I think it's going to be in good hands. But this was good foundation to lay down for its sequel. Let's put it that way. Finally, for this part of the video, number 21 is 28 Days Later. This brought the zombie genre into a whole new realm. We had never really seen running, rampaging zombies before. We've always seen the zombies that are always slow moving, sometimes a little bit faster. They eat your brains, you turn into a zombie, so on and so forth. These zombies are actually quite terrifying. Now, there's not really many jump out scares per se, but the aspect of being in this situation is what makes this film scary. The acting is really good, but I just find the rest of the films on my list are much better than this one. I do, however, like the cinematography of it, where it's gritty looking. It looks as if you're kind of like in that time, like you're in the world that they're building in this. And they try to flesh out these characters enough for you to really feel for them, but at the same time, it's not quite done as best as it could be. But the makeup, the action sequences are all really well done, and if you haven't seen it, you should go watch it. That is my first half of this top 40 list. I will continue it on September 2nd. Hopefully you enjoyed the first half of the top 40 of this decade. If you did, make sure you give it a like. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, because I put out weekly videos, and hit that notification bell so you know when I post a brand new video, because if you don't, how else are you gonna know when I post? You won't. So do it. I am now going to continue watching Only Murders in the Building because I just started that and I'm already in love after 2 episodes. I'll see you on the next video, but until then, goodbye, friendships.